It started as an ordinary press moment. But what happened next would ripple across the global diplomatic stage like a thunderclap. President Donald Trump, known for his bold and often unexpected political moves, stepped in front of cameras on May 19, 2025, and made a statement that stunned the world. He had just finished a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And not only that, he claimed that both Russia and Ukraine were ready to begin peace negotiations immediately. And the location he proposed? Not Geneva. Not Brussels. But the Vatican. Yes, Trump suggested that Pope Leo XIV, the newly elected pontiff, should host the most consequential peace talks of our time, between two nations locked in a brutal war. To understand the weight of this moment, we must rewind. The Russia-Ukraine war, which began with the invasion in 2022, has devastated the Eastern European region. Thousands of lives lost. Cities reduced to rubble. Millions of refugees scattered across Europe. Several ceasefire attempts had collapsed. Sanctions intensified. Diplomatic channels were strained to breaking point. Then came the proposal. Trump, the current commander-in-chief, said he spoke directly with Putin. The conversation, he claimed, was very positive. Putin, he said, was ready to talk. And the most intriguing part? Trump said Pope Leo XIV was also interested in facilitating these peace talks in the Vatican. This wasn't just political. It was spiritual, symbolic, historic. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost, had just been elected on May 8th. He was the first American-born pope in history. And just 11 days into his papacy, he was already being thrust into one of the world's deadliest conflicts. Was he prepared for this role? The answer, it turns out, may be yes. We must build bridges, not walls. Heal wounds, not widen them. Peace is not just an idea, it is our sacred duty. These were his words during his inaugural Mass, attended by hundreds of thousands, including world leaders like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. From the very beginning, Pope Leo made clear that his papacy would be guided by unity, healing, and dialogue. So when Trump dropped the bombshell that the Pope might host the peace talks, the world began to ask, could this actually happen? And if it did, what would it mean for global peace? European leaders were quick to respond. Italy's Prime Minister called it a welcome and bold idea. France and Germany issued joint statements saying they appreciate the Vatican's moral authority. The U.S. State Department confirmed it had been briefed on the president's conversations and was actively supporting diplomatic momentum. But from the Vatican? Silence. At least initially. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, later addressed the press. The Holy See has always offered itself as a neutral ground for peace. We are willing to listen and assist. But no formal invitation has yet been extended. Careful. Diplomatic. Measured. Behind closed doors, however, sources suggested that Pope Leo XIV was deeply moved by the possibility of playing a key role in ending the war. And why wouldn't he be? As a young man, Robert Prevost was a missionary priest in Peru. He had seen suffering up close. He had fought poverty with love. He had mediated gang conflicts, helped reconcile broken families, and rebuilt churches in war-torn towns. Now, as Pope, could he help end a war between nations? It wouldn't be the first time the Vatican played such a role. The Vatican helped facilitate secret diplomacy during World War II. It worked behind the scenes during the Cold War. Popes have written letters to leaders, sent envoys, and even helped end civil wars in Latin America and Africa. But this, hosting peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, would be a different scale altogether. The logistics alone would be staggering. Both nations would have to agree on terms. Security would be paramount. Media from every corner of the globe would descend on Vatican City. And the stakes? Higher than ever. Because this isn't just about territory. It's about trust. It's about healing wounds, physical, emotional, and historical. Trump's suggestion might sound outlandish to some, but symbolically, the Vatican is a powerful venue. It's neutral, moral, and deeply historic. What makes this unique is Pope Leo himself. He's American. He understands Western concerns. But he's also a man of the people, with deep roots in Latin America. That cross-cultural empathy matters. And so, within just days of Trump's announcement, the world watched with curiosity, hope, and skepticism. Would this become a turning point in the war? Would Russia and Ukraine actually come to the table? And most importantly, was Pope Leo XIV ready to become the peacemaker the world desperately needed? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear. The world had just witnessed a dramatic shift in diplomacy, where political power, spiritual influence, and moral courage might converge at the heart of Rome. When President Donald Trump publicly proposed that Pope Leo XIV host peace talks between Russia and Ukraine at the Vatican, it sounded like the stuff of historical fiction. But those familiar with Vatican diplomacy know, it's not a fantasy. It's precedent. The Vatican is not just the headquarters of the Catholic Church. It's also one of the world's oldest and most resilient diplomatic institutions. It has no army, no weapons, no borders to defend. Yet it has brokered peace, softened hardened hearts, and guided nations toward resolution for centuries. And now, under the leadership of Pope Leo XIV, the Vatican may be preparing once again to play its most sacred role, peacemaker. Shortly after Trump's announcement, Pope Leo received Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in a private audience at the Vatican. They delivered a personal message from President Trump, a formal proposal to host peace talks between Ukraine and Russia on neutral, sacred ground. Though the Vatican declined to publicly confirm the invitation at that time, insiders say the Pope was deeply moved by the possibility. He understood the stakes. And he quietly began to prepare. According to sources within the Secretariat of State, Vatican diplomats drafted internal assessments. What format the talks would take. What symbolic role the Pope could play. And whether the Vatican's neutrality could be maintained under pressure from global powers. They weren't just planning a meeting. They were designing an atmosphere. Narrator. Because here, in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica, the smallest state on earth holds one of the greatest powers, moral authority. Pope Leo XIV isn't just a spiritual figure. He's a man who lived among the suffering. As a bishop in Peru, he helped marginalized communities rebuild their lives from scratch. He's not a career diplomat, but he's a seasoned healer of broken places. Meanwhile, global reaction to President Trump's Vatican proposal was swift. Ukraine's leadership, while cautious, expressed willingness to engage in dialogue, provided that any peace initiative respected Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and justice for victims of war. Russia, on the other hand, confirmed that President Putin had spoken with President Trump and was open to negotiation, but reiterated demands for Ukrainian neutrality and recognition of Russia's control over annexed territories. The distance between these positions is vast, but not insurmountable. Because diplomacy is not about instant agreement. It's about creating space for the impossible to become possible. And the Vatican excels at that. We are willing to offer our moral presence, our setting, and our prayer. Peace must be pursued, not postponed. Narrator. Behind the scenes, coordination intensified. Special envoys from both countries were contacted. EU mediators were briefed. And quietly, Rome began preparing. Security experts scoped out possible venues within Vatican territory, rooms with no windows, entrances with backdoor access. The Sistine Chapel was ruled out. So was the Sala Clementina. The working location? A lesser-known conference hall in the Apostolic Palace, where popes have met monarchs, rebels, and revolutionaries. Narrator. But this wouldn't be a traditional summit. There would be no red carpet. No flags. No speeches. Just two delegations, a circle of chairs, and the moral shadow of St. Peter looming overhead. The plan is simple but profound. Let the Vatican serve as host, not arbitrator. Let Pope Leo open the proceedings with a short message on reconciliation. Let the rest unfold in privacy. And what will Pope Leo say? Though no official script has been released, insiders say he has drafted a meditation on mercy, a short homily intended to pierce the political and awaken the personal. Narrator. Why? Because the Pope believes what's broken in this war isn't just land, it's trust. And yet, there is risk. There are voices in Ukraine who fear any talks with Russia might legitimize aggression. There are skeptics in the West who see Trump's initiative as political theater. And there are hardliners in Moscow who view the Church as a Western tool. Can the Vatican walk this tightrope? Narrator. Pope Leo thinks it must. Pope Leo XIV voiceover. If not us, who? If not now, when? Narrator. And this is why history matters. Because what's unfolding is not a new chapter. It's the continuation of an ancient tradition. Where emperors met popes. Where nations laid down swords. And where the hardest hearts bent, not to force, but to faith. Trump's proposal has not been dismissed. In fact, according to recent statements from the Italian government and EU envoys, logistical support is already being assembled. A joint task group, comprised of Vatican officers, EU observers, and neutral facilitators, has reportedly been created to manage what they are now calling the Rome peace path. It's not a guarantee of peace. But it's a door. And for now, both Russia and Ukraine have shown interest in walking through it. What happens next? Will the talks take place? Will they lead to peace? We cannot yet say. But one thing is clear. The Vatican is preparing. Pope Leo XIV is ready. And the world is watching. The eyes of the world are fixed on a city less than half a square kilometer in size. A city of faith. A city of diplomacy. A city preparing to become the stage for one of the most important conversations of our time. Vatican City, under the moral leadership of Pope Leo XIV, may soon host peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, an effort first suggested by President Donald Trump. But as anticipation builds, so do the questions. Can this really lead to peace? Or is it just another symbolic gesture lost in a sea of failed negotiations? Let's examine the obstacles and the hope. First, the leaders. President Vladimir Putin continues to frame Russia's involvement in Ukraine as a strategic necessity. His red lines are clear. No NATO expansion. Recognition of Russian control over Crimea. Security guarantees for pro-Russian regions in Donbass. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky insists Ukraine's territorial integrity is non-negotiable. War crimes must be acknowledged. Any peace must serve justice, not just politics. Two very different worldviews. And yet, both sides have expressed interest in the Vatican initiative. Narrator. Why? Because it's not being pushed by generals. It's not being orchestrated by arms dealers. It's being guided by a man of faith, Pope Leo XIV. For Leo, this isn't about politics. It's about human dignity. Reports from the Vatican suggest the Pope has prepared a powerful, personal message titled, The Light of Peace in a Wounded World. In it, he reportedly addresses not the governments, but the people. He writes, To the children who sleep in bunkers, to the mothers who bury their sons, to the fathers who no longer recognize their homeland. May your tears be seen. May your voices be heard. May your pain lead not to vengeance, but to vision. And he doesn't stop there. Sources say Pope Leo plans a symbolic act unlike any ever performed in a peace negotiation. He intends to wash the feet of two war widows, one Ukrainian, one Russian, together. It is an act rooted in Jesus' final hours. An act of humility, love, and forgiveness. The message? That healing does not come from power, but from servanthood. World reactions to this initiative have been dramatic. In Brussels, EU leaders called it a rare opening in a closed-door war. In Beijing, officials stated they support any peaceful and faith-centered intervention. And in Washington, President Trump's administration reaffirmed support. The president believes faith can heal what politics has broken. But not everyone is optimistic. Critics argue that the Vatican cannot offer what Ukraine truly needs. security guarantees, economic recovery aid, military deterrence. Others worry that Russia may use the talks as a PR stunt, appearing conciliatory while continuing its operations. This isn't a battlefield resolution. It's a PR chess move. Russia wins either way. Talks stall, they blame the West. Talks proceed, they shape the narrative. Expert 2, Vatican historian. That may be true. But peace is rarely pure. What matters is creating movement, and this could be the start. And then, there's the question of what success would even look like. This won't be a grand treaty signing. It likely won't end with flags waving and declarations made. No, if it succeeds, it will be quiet. Perhaps a ceasefire corridor for humanitarian aid. Or a prisoner exchange agreement. Or even just the resumption of suspended back-channel talks. Small steps. But real ones. And all of it, sparked by a proposal from President Trump, and shepherded by a pope barely a month into his papacy. History teaches us this. Peace rarely begins with perfect plans. It begins with presence. With someone, anyone, willing to stand in the middle. And in this case, that someone is a man in white robes. A former missionary from Chicago. Now known to the world as Pope Leo XIV. Will Russia and Ukraine sit in the same room? Will words triumph over weapons? We do not know. But we know this. The invitation has been sent. The seats are being arranged. The world is pausing, just long enough to hope. Because even in an age of drones and nuclear threats, even in a time of disinformation and fear, even now, faith still speaks. Peace still whispers. And sometimes, the smallest nation in the world can carry the largest voice. May they come. May they listen. And may the world, finally, begin to heal.